Okay. No response from either yet, Ms.
No.
Pittenger? Okay,
No.
all right. We'll call the meeting to order at 6:04. And this is the July 27th meeting of the Citizens Police Review Board. Welcome, everyone. At this point, we do not have a quorum to vote on items on the agenda. However, we will go through items, and if there are some that require a vote, they would need to be ratified at the next meeting. Is that acceptable, Mr. Ward?
I think the better practice would be to wait for the quorum as opposed to taking action even publicly and looking for a ratification at the subsequent meeting.
Okay, all right.
And the reason why I say that is that there was a recent amendment to the Sunshine Act. So people are paying close attention to what is done on the record and what is done consistent with agendas. So to the extent that the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act was amended requiring greater scrutiny of agendas, I'm just a little bit cautious about taking action without a quorum today.
Okay. All right. So we will move through the agenda with what we can consider for tonight's meeting. So we have present Ms. McClellan and Mr. Green and myself as board members. We will hold on the approval of the minutes from June 22nd. Hopefully everyone did receive those minutes though. We will follow the agenda as has been printed, and we will look at the cases. We will not take any action on them, and we will have public comments if we have anyone who wants to make a comment at the end of this meeting. The only thing I want to report in my report today is, well, there are two things. Ms. Pittenger and I had a meeting with the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania, Stephen Kaufman, and that was a very productive meeting in my mind's eye. We had an open conversation about police issues in the city of Pittsburgh, and it was a healthy exchange. I'm sure Ms. Pittenger will add more to that in her report when she gives it. And secondly, we had a very good meeting with Mr. Lamb and Councilman Burgess and the staff of both of their offices regarding the review from Mr. Lamb's office, the audit, I should say, from Mr. Lamb's office of the CPRB. And the intent of that meeting was to plan for the recommendations that Mr. Lamb has made for the CPRB. So Ms. Pittenger will address that in her report. So that ends my report. And we will move to the Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. As Dr. Darby reported, we had a courtesy meeting with the acting U.S. Attorney for the Western Pennsylvania District. And what's interesting about that is that Steve Kaufman, who is the acting United States Attorney right now, was also and served as solicitor to this board for several years. It was kind of weird to go talk to the U.S. Attorney, who also happened to be your own solicitor for many years and guided us through some pretty stormy waters. Mr. Ward, I think were you here with Steve for a short time?
No, what happened was the law firm of Tiemann and Kaufman later became Tiemann and Ward. So Steve, who is an able lawyer and a good friend, left private practice to return to the U.S. Attorney's Office as an assistant, rose up the ranks as chief of the fraud section, chief of the criminal division, first assistant United States attorney and now is doing a great job as acting United States attorney. But no, we did not overlap.
No, I wasn't sure about that. And when the firm switched, I couldn't remember where Steve fell in between. But that made it particularly a friendly meeting. And we met also in that meeting with representatives from the FBI and the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Attorney's Office. And it was, as Dr. Darby reported, it was a friendly courtesy meeting to just discuss generally. We were not there for any official business or accusatory business or anything of that nature. It was strictly an opportunity for Dr. Darby and myself to meet with those key personnel in the U.S. Attorney's Office now. The former U.S. Attorney, not Mr. Brady, but prior to him, Dave Hickton, had convened a community police relations working group shortly after the incident in 2010 with Jordan Miles and city police officers. And that group was very effective. It endured for a couple of years. It fostered community group meetings. We did some surveys among different municipalities about what their pressing needs were, the role of law enforcement. It was a busy group, and it was an effective group. And when Mr. Hickton left and Mr. Brady came in, the group met one time, and we haven't met since. So you're talking a couple of years that Mr. Brady was the U.S. Attorney, and that group kind of fell apart, and some of the leadership has gone on. So it was an opportunity to try to reconnect and determine whether it would be worthwhile to pursue putting a group like that together again, or if perhaps that should be a task left to the person appointed as the permanent U.S. Attorney. The meeting with the controller last week was informative, and it was our opportunity to explore some of the deficiencies that we had recognized in the course of the performance audit that the controller issued in May, pursuant to a year-long performance audit on the CPRB. And we had determined that it would be, we wanted to know if our idea about moving forward with an expansion was consistent with the report issued by the controller, and if it was something palatable and reasonable to members of council, their staff, and to the controller's staff. Again, it was more of a courtesy meeting than it was an official. There was no action taken by any means. But as a result of that meeting, we did come up with a proposal, which was, I'm going to try this, I hope I don't lose you all, which was distributed to the members as recently as last night. I believe you received an advance copy of the revisions that we made pursuant to the meeting with Controller Lamb. The original proposal that you received a week or so ago was pretty heavy in its implementation to occur in like 1 year, which was kind of crazy thinking about it, but we've revised it to phase it in over a 3-year period, 2022, 2023, and 2024. And we essentially broke it down into some discrete units. The community advocacy unit was developed, excuse me, to enhance the board's footprint in the community and the engagement with community participants from the schools, from community organizations like the public safety councils, churches, wherever a community gathers, that we would have an opportunity to have someone available that would be engaged and represent the board and pursue an enhanced relationship between the community and the police by letting the board know what major areas of concern existed in the community at any given time. Now, we talked about potentially including a community wellness advocate. That's kind of a discretionary idea right now, that potentially a community wellness advocate could serve as a liaison to making sure that the Office of Community Wellness is doing what they're supposed to be doing, that diversion tactics that are being employed by police, by the courts, by the prison system, that they're working and that they are reducing the kinds of situations that often attract police involvement and then we know end up not so well. So we're wondering about, that might be a good idea to include someone who could be an advocate with that kind of oversight. But as I said, that's a kind of specialized position that we're still thinking about, but we included it here because it was being considered. The legal advocacy unit, now that's stepping into a whole different level of advocacy for us, having a resident staff attorney who could serve as a special prosecutor and prosecute complaints before the panel of the board, the hearing panels. And it could also conduct legal research related to current decisions and best practices that have been tested and tried or have emanated from court decisions that are slow to catch up sometimes with practice, but do affect the law enforcement practices and the relationship between the community and the police. It would also allow us to have an oversight view of activities that may rise to the level of corruption or suspicion of corruption. When you start talking about procurement practices, hiring practices, things that raise the eyebrow, we never have had the opportunity to seriously dig in and evaluate those kinds of things, that this would give us an opportunity and the expertise to do so. It kind of brings us out to more of an inspector general's role to assure that there is accountability in the institutional system of those services related to police services in the city of Pittsburgh, that there is integrity and a different level of advocacy for public assurances. This position would not be in lieu of or replace our independent board solicitor. It would be serve to some degree as an assistance to the CPRB solicitor, but the interests served would be entirely different. And the board's interests represented by the CPRB solicitor will always remain the board's interest, and has to be that way as its own institutional entity. Paralegals, we've indicated 2 would probably be a good idea. One to be directly supportive of the attorney, and one who can assist with the investigative unit to take statements, to make sure evidence is retained, obtained and retained properly, to be a support to the investigators and case preparation that would be going to public hearings. The enhanced investigation unit, we were contemplating adding a lead investigator that would serve as a liaison, that would be able to take complaints that are particularly complex, assist the investigators with preparing those cases, but also to take forward to either the legal unit or the community advocacy unit or somewhere else, that which needed to be handled beyond what a normal, ordinary, routine case investigation would require. And it would make sure that somebody was the fulcrum upon which that case moved forward, and it wouldn't get lost or be unnecessarily delayed, because our investigators, they have a lot of cases and you can only do so much at one time. This would give us that opportunity to make sure individual cases that had complexity attached to them were being taken care of individually and comprehensively. All of our investigators are certified practitioners of oversight. That credential is issued by the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. There are ongoing continuing education requirements to maintain those credentials. And we're recognizing that. And in addition to one new investigator to bring the hands-on investigative staff up to 4, we would maintain the lead investigator as intake. And that person's job is all the intake and processing of every single case an inquiry that hits the office. So all of those individuals would be certified practitioners of oversight and maintain those credentials throughout their service to the board. The administrative unit is certainly that's where all the balancing and all of the bureaucratic stuff happens. We have talked about adding a performance auditor to our staff at that level, at the administrative level, that could assist the board in assuring that the quality of investigations and the integrity of our own internal investigations are good, and that they maintain to standards that are expected. And also assist us in meeting the recent mandate from November of 2020 that we cooperate and participate in joint performance audits with the performance auditor team from the city controller. The research and development advisor would be someone dedicated to assuring that our own policies and practices are consistent with the best practices in the industry at the time, that there would be expertise to review police policies. We do that now, but we're doing it, without a dedicated staff person responsible and with the credible expertise to do so. This would enable us to have that expertise on board. The in-service training, making sure that we're maintaining a curriculum, if you will, that we make sure we have staff development that's appropriate, as well as creating opportunities for board members to participate in extra training sessions or unique training sessions. That would be a point person for that activity. The communication specialist is someone we do not have right now. We have a need, and I think we all acknowledge a deficiency when it comes to maintaining a presence in social media, making sure that our website is maintained in a timely fashion, making sure that public notices and public releases are issued in a timely fashion, and also available to schedule and coordinate presentations and appearances for board members and staff people when there's a call for a presentation to be given to a group or community interest. So this is what we look like right now and what we have looked like for many, many years. Our board, of course, supported by their independent solicitor with whom I have a relationship on a daily operational as needed basis. Our assistant director, and in our investigations unit has right now 4 individuals. That's it. That's all we've had for years. And we are proposing to take all those functions I just described and spread them out into an organizational design that would be responsive to those identified goals. The community advocacy unit would consist of 5 individuals, potentially 4. I am still on the fence about the community wellness liaison, but for purposes of discussion, it's here. The legal advocacy, the lawyer and 2 paralegals supporting that position. The investigative unit being expanded by 1 investigator and 1 lead investigator to serve as a liaison. And the administrative and support unit being expanded to include the communication specialist, the performance auditor, research and development advisor, and also administrative support, which I neglected to mention. We don't have any clerical support. Right here, you can see there is no administrative support. There's an assistant executive director, Ms. Stephanie, that does all the bureaucratic, all of the organizational administrative duties, as well as supporting the investigative unit. Here we've added added three, not additional, bringing in 3 administrative support individuals, 1 for the community advocacy unit and 1 for the administrative, including the legal advocacy, although there would be paralegals there to support a lot of that activity in that unit, but to also support the investigative unit. So that's what we are proposing to move the board functions to. And because it was kind of crazy to think we could even consider doing this in 1 year, which of course I thought maybe we could, I realized that's pretty unrealistic. So on this proposed budget, which was distributed to members last night, you can see in a grayed out form what the original budget offer was, what we proposed, and then how we have phased it in over the subsequent 3 years, 22, 23, and 24. The additional personnel, they are listed under each year that we would propose to bring those positions on. In the first year, we would be adding 6, in the second 3, and in the third year, 7 new staff people, going from 6 today, this year in 2021, to 12 in 2022, 15 in 23, and 22 in 24. That phased in amount is what you see in this budget. Now, at the bottom, you'll see where there is an equivalency table, and that is predicated on a recommendation from the city controller, where across the country, there are a variety of different ways of funding civilian oversight entities, remembering that there are many different models of civilian oversight. But many of them are adopting a method of using an equivalency for the oversight entity to the law enforcement budget in their communities. Our controller assessed our circumstance and suggested somewhere maybe close to 2% of the police budget equivalency would be a reasonable amount to fund the Citizen Police Review Board. And so when we crafted this, you can see that with our proposal, we are still significantly below 2%. We could certainly work up to that, but here in a reasonable fashion of phasing in a very significant expansion of the board's function in the community, it's still a reasonable amount. The projected Bureau of Police figures there are truly projected from past percentages used in past budgets. I have no idea if they're credible to the extent that this is what one can expect for 2022, 23, or 24 for the Bureau of Police budget. But I do know in 2020 and 2021, they did project the 2022 number. So we just move forward from there. And it's illustrated there, the impact that our proposed reorganization would have. And I think that's it. Yes, it is. So I just wanted to give an opportunity to everybody to, I know you had this proposal to look at, but to just describe it a little bit more in terms of what we're really talking about doing. And if the board is okay with that, if you have decided you want to adopt and approve it, I know we're in a bit of a bind because we don't have a quorum. Time is of the essence because the budget season is now open in the city. And it's important that we begin to discuss this with the administration as well as the city council, so that as we go forward, they're all aware of what the board wishes to do.
Well, we need some guidance from Mr. Ward on that one.
Well, at this point, the board is not scheduled to meet in August. I believe that the next meeting of the board will be held sometime in September. There may be a need formal activity to basically inform and instruct the executive director how to best approach the city controller with the board's wishes for this particular phased-in model. From my perspective, from a legal perspective, as well as a budgetary perspective, it makes a lot of sense. I commend Ms. Pittenger for doing a great job, both on the original draft and the phased-in draft, in which she ramped it up over a period of 3 years. I also, at the risk of sounding self-serving, do think there's a benefit by having me serve as solicitor to the board with a separate lawyer representing the staff, and particularly in those cases where there's a need for public hearings. In the past, the board has used private counsel for those particular occasions, and I would anticipate, based on this structure, that instead the Office of the Independent Citizen Police Review Board would use their in-house attorney to prosecute those cases, which would then be presented to the board, with me essentially serving as a hearing officer as well as solicitor to the board. So it's not a duplication of effort, but rather I remain as your solicitor. But the proposal contemplates having a different attorney as the prosecuting attorney in public hearings. The real question, though, is what guidance do you need in the very short term? I would lean toward doing something before August 29th, which I believe is the effective date for the Sunshine Act, not to curtail it or to avoid it, but rather to make sure that what we're doing is consistent with the existing case law under the Sunshine Act. And that may be to set a notice for a special meeting, brief one, where you would have a quorum and would be limited to the posted agenda item of the review of the executive director's 3-year proposal to expand the board. So that would require, I think, a separate meeting. I like that, frankly, better than voting today without a quorum, because the next time you'd be scheduled to meet would be September. And then that still ties Beth's hands by not having the formal guidance that she needs to move forward with the board's approval. You're able to discuss it today, you just can't vote on it. Does that make sense, Beth, that we could perhaps schedule a special meeting with adequate notice?
Yes, we just give notice and it would be the only agenda item.
Is there a time limitation before we can schedule that meeting?
Only
believe-
to the extent that, I'm sorry, Beth, there's no limitation legally. The limitation would be from a budget perspective that this is budget season, from what I can tell, and that the city controller needs to get some kind of proposal to get an idea as to what is anticipated for the board's resources.
For example, could we schedule a meeting within a 2-week period, a 4-week period? Okay. All right.
And I would recommend that.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe we only have a 24-hour notice for a special meeting.
Mm-hmm.
It might be 48. I'll double check that.
Okay.
So
I'm pleased. Oh, go ahead, Karen.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
We could have a meeting on just this proposal next week.
Mhm.
I think getting it said and done and out of the way so that the staff and Beth can work on this without the end of budget season looming over their heads.
Sure. And thank you, Ms. Pittenger, for the proposal. I think it's critical for us to have the community liaison positions in place in the first phase in. That will address some of the intent we've had in terms of reaching out to the community more, interacting with the community more, having a presence in the community more. So those positions are certainly critical ones, I think, for us at this time. Other board comments?
I'll simply chime in to say that although we aren't taking a vote on this idea because we can't vote right now, I am in favor of scheduling a separate meeting specifically for the purpose of acting on the proposal. So,
All right. Well, Ms. Pinniger, you can work on that and inform, you have to give the notice and the board members so that we can schedule that meeting.
Will do. And I'll also note, or just tonight, I just want to note that, as usual, I'm losing my voice. You are down 2 members. So to make quorum, we need 4, and your only margin is with 2. And so as we see, you know, whatever has happened, we know one individual member was out on an appointment and wasn't certain she'd be able to get back in time, couldn't be helped. And I believe the other member may actually be out of town, not certain about that. But that just goes to show that council and the mayor, it's critical that they respect your notices when delivered and that they endeavor to appoint successors to those who leave or whose seats are vacated, so that this doesn't happen to you as a board, to reduce your ability, to limit you.
Correct.
And this is when we see these vacancies take their toll.
Correct. Okay. If there are no other comments on the proposal, do you have anything more for your report, Ms. Pittinger?
Only to bring your attention to a case that's coming out of Philadelphia. Ms. Bridget actually circulated this right before our board meeting. There's a case where the district attorney in Philadelphia is challenging the Pennsylvania state law, the statute that controls the use of force and deadly force by police officers in Pennsylvania. He's alleging that it is in direct contradiction to federal law from Tennessee versus Garner and Graham. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on all those names. But anyway, there's 2 cases that resulted in a change in federal law related to use of force, deadly force against a fleeing felon. And Tennessee versus Garner and Graham versus Connor are the 2 landmark cases that have made federal laws related to the use of deadly force applicable to law enforcement. In Pennsylvania, our statute does not make the distinction related to, in Pennsylvania, they can use deadly force, and Ms. McClellan, you can probably correct me on this, but it is permissible to use deadly force on someone fleeing to evade arrest. And that's entirely different from a fleeing felon who presents an imminent threat. Is that correct?
I don't know if that is still in force.
That is the question that has been placed now as a result of this case in Philadelphia, where there's a police officer being, he's on trial. He was charged because he shot an unarmed man running from the scene, but he was unarmed and apparently there was no felony. There was no violent felony. And he was charged. But what the district attorney's point is that the jury instructions that follow this kind of a situation where it's in conflict with the prevailing federal law, and Pennsylvania's statute conflicts with that, it's got to be fixed somehow. So that question is coming out of the Philadelphia case that will have an impact on law enforcement practices across the Commonwealth, and something we'll keep an eye on. And I wanted to thank I want to thank Ms. Bridget for bringing that to our attention this afternoon. But it will have a critical influence. Yeah.
It's my understanding that unless the fleeing felon poses imminent danger to the community at that moment, you got to get them another day.
Yeah, and that's what I thought too. I was surprised to see that this was, the objective reasonableness standard that came out of Graham v. O'Connor, or Connor, whatever it is. That reasonable objective, that's kind of what it seems like it balances on. I'm not sure about that, but I think that whatever comes out of this Philadelphia case will have an influence across the Commonwealth and maybe fix something if it's not consistent. Because I know when we talk to officers about the use of deadly force, and when there was an effort, and I believe Ms. McClellan, you went and testified at a hearing that the state representatives held a couple years ago about changing the language, and that whole necessary versus whatever it was, it never moved. It never moved out of committee. So it wasn't changed in Pennsylvania. And now this district attorney is bringing it up as an inconsistency, and they got to do something. So maybe it will get clarified, and that would be a good thing.
That would be a really good thing.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll hear more about it, and we'll keep an eye on it. That's all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right, is there any unfinished business? Any new business? For case reviews, Mr. Ward, should I just read them into the record that they were presented at this month's meeting, but no vote was taken?
You could do that. I think that's sort of superfluous since there was no vote. What you might do is consider at your agenda for your special meeting in August to actually do two things: to do not only a vote as to the proposed expansion for budgetary purposes, but since the votes probably won't take too long, I would probably defer action from tonight until the August meeting for the case.
Okay. Okay. All right. So we will consider the case reviews at the call meeting that will be scheduled. All right. The only announcement is to mark your calendar for the September meeting on September 28th, and that will be via Zoom at that time. Were there any signups for tonight's meeting?
We have 2 attendees. I'm not sure if either of them want to say something. There's something in the chat.
Hi and bye, everyone. Mark and Tris.
Okay. Hi, Mark, and hi, Trish. Okay.
Ozarks.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if there are no public comments, may I have a motion to adjourn? Ms. McClellan and Mr. Green seconded. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The motion carries. We will be on alert to hear from Ms. Pittenger regarding the call meeting of the board. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Ward, the investigators. Thank you very much.